Just make it quick, Mom. We have dinner reservations. That was what my daughter said to me at my 80th birthday. Not happy birthday. Not, we're so glad you made it. Just make it quick. I was holding the cake I had baked myself that morning. Lemon with raspberry filling, the kind Daniel used to request every year before he passed. The candles were lit. The wax was already starting to pool. I stood at the head of the table in Meredith's dining room, looking at the faces I had spent 80 years loving, and I realized not one of them was looking back at me. So I did what she asked. I made it quick. I blew out the candles in a single breath. I set the cake down on the table. I untied the apron I had worn over my good blue dress. I folded it once, set it on the chair, and I walked out of that house without saying goodbye. No one came after me. I didn't expect them to. I heard the faint scrape of a chair as someone pulled closer to the table. I heard Meredith's husband say, "Is she okay?" And Meredith answer, "She's fine. She gets like this." I kept walking. The driveway was long. Gravel crunched under my shoes. My coat was still inside, draped over the banister in their front hall. But I didn't turn back. Not for a coat. Not for anything. The air was cold for late April, sharp at the collarbones. My cardigan wasn't enough, but it was what I had. I walked to the end of the driveway, then down the sidewalk, then 3 more blocks until I reached the bench by the bus stop on Fremont. I sat down. I placed my purse on my lap. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat and watched the sky turn the color of old silver. A woman at the bus stop glanced at me. She was maybe 30. She had a stroller with a sleeping baby inside. She smiled. The kind of smile strangers give each other when they think something might be wrong but don't want to ask. I smiled back. I must have looked strange. A woman my age in a blue dress and no coat, sitting at a bus stop on a Sunday evening with a purse and nothing else. But I felt strange. Not the kind of strange that comes from confusion. The kind that comes from clarity. From seeing something you have been looking at for 40 years and finally recognizing its shape. The bus came. I got on. I had just enough in my change purse for the fare. I sat 3 rows from the back and looked out the window as Meredith's neighborhood slid away behind me. The houses got smaller, the lawns got browner, the streetlights flickered on one by one. I rode all the way to the last stop on the line, which was 6 blocks from my house. I walked the rest of the way. My knees ached, my hip complained. I didn't stop. When I reached my front door, I stood there for a long moment before putting the key in the lock. This house had been mine for 52 years. Daniel and I bought it in 1972 with a VA loan and a prayer. I had raised both girls in these rooms, sewn curtains for every window, painted the porch 3 different colors over the decades. And yet that night, standing on the threshold with my hand on the key, it felt like I was coming home for the first time. Like the house had been waiting for me to return alone. I opened the door. I turned on 1 lamp. I made myself a cup of tea. And I sat at the kitchen table in my good blue dress, and I said aloud to the empty room, "Happy birthday, Eleanor." Then I cried. Not long, maybe 3 minutes. I let it come, and then I let it go. I need to tell you about Meredith before I tell you what came next. Because what came next doesn't make sense unless you understand what came before. Meredith is my oldest. She is 56 years old. She is a family law attorney, which is the kind of irony you only appreciate if you've lived it. She has 2 sons, both grown, both living in other states, both polite to me in the distant way grandchildren are when their mother has trained them to be. Her husband Gregory is an orthodontist. He is kind in the way some men are when they've learned that kindness is easier than engagement. He nods. He refills water glasses. He asks about my arthritis and forgets what I said by the next visit. Meredith has always been precise. Even as a child, she alphabetized her books. She color-coded her closet at 9 years old. She corrected my grammar at the dinner table when she was in the 6th grade. I used to think it was charming. I used to think it meant she would go far. She did go far. She just didn't take me with her. My younger daughter, Caroline, was different. Caroline was messy, warm, loud. She laughed with her whole body. She brought stray cats home and cried when Daniel said they couldn't keep them. She sent me cards for no reason, just a note that said, "Thinking of you, Mama. Go easy today." Caroline died 11 years ago. Breast cancer. She was 43. She left behind a daughter named Juniper, who was 15 at the time, and a husband named Tomas, who remarried 3 years later. Tomas was never unkind to me, but Juniper was the thread I held onto. She was the piece of Caroline I got to keep. Meredith took Juniper in after Caroline died. I offered, I begged. But I was 69 then, and Meredith said, and I quote, "Mum, you can't raise a teenager. Be reasonable." So Juniper moved in with Meredith and Gregory and their 2 sons. And over the years, I watched her change. I watched the loud girl with Caroline's laugh grow quieter. I watched her learn to smooth her hair before visits, to say please and thank you like a scripted line. I watched her go to the college. Meredith chose and study the major. Meredith suggested, and wear the clothes Meredith approved of. But Juniper still called me. Not often, but enough. The morning after my birthday, I woke up at 6. I always do. My body doesn't know how to sleep past the sunrise anymore, and I stopped fighting it years ago. I made coffee in the little pot Daniel bought me for our 30th anniversary. I sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper I still had delivered, even though I read most of it online now. Habit, mostly. The sound of the folded paper hitting the porch in the dark was something I didn't want to lose. The phone started ringing at 7:40. Meredith. I didn't pick up. It rang again at 7:52, then at 8:04, then at 8:21. I watched the phone the way you watch a kettle you know is about to whistle. Knowing it will happen, waiting for it anyway. At 8:40, a text came through. "Mom, Gregory said you left without saying anything. I don't know what's going on. Can you please call me back? We need to talk about this." No question about whether I got home. No question about whether I was warm enough. No question about the coat I'd left in her front hall. Just the word this. "We need to talk about this," as if my leaving was a behavior to be managed. As if I were a problem her firm had been asked to solve. I didn't answer. I made another cup of coffee. I put on my slippers. I walked out to the backyard, which was small and tired after the winter, and I stood there, in my robe, with my cup in my hand, and looked at the garden beds. They hadn't been touched in 2 years. Meredith had hired a landscaper after I broke my wrist in 2022, and the landscaper had ripped out everything I had planted. The roses Daniel gave me for our 40th. The rosemary I had grown from a cutting my mother gave me in 1968. The hydrangeas that used to brush the kitchen window in summer. All of it gone, replaced with low-maintenance grasses and decorative rocks because Meredith said, and I quote again, "You don't need to be on your knees in the dirt at your age, Mom." I stood there in the cold grass and made a list in my head. The first thing I wanted was the rosemary back. I didn't know where I would get a cutting, but I wanted it. The phone rang again inside. I let it ring. By noon, there were 17 missed calls. 11 from Meredith, 2 from Gregory, 4 from numbers I didn't recognize, which I assumed were also Meredith, trying from different lines. There were also 6 text messages, each one slightly more pointed than the last. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Mom, please. I don't understand what I did wrong. You embarrassed us in front of the Hendersons. Gregory is worried. Mom, if you don't answer, I'm going to drive over." I looked at that last one for a long time. Then I walked to the front door and turned the deadbolt. I hadn't used the deadbolt in years. Daniel and I never locked the front door during the day. It wasn't that kind of neighborhood, and it wasn't that kind of marriage. But that afternoon, I locked it. I locked the back door too. I closed the blinds on the front window. Then I sat down at the kitchen table with my notebook, the one I use for grocery lists and crosswords, and I turned to a fresh page, and I wrote one sentence at the top. What do I actually own? I underlined it twice. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through drawers, not cleaning, inventorying, the file cabinet in the spare bedroom, the safety deposit box keys in the kitchen drawer, the folder in the closet labeled Important in Daniel's handwriting from 1998. I pulled everything out. I stacked it on the kitchen table. I made piles, deed, mortgage papers, life insurance, pension paperwork, social security records, the title to my car, Daniel's will, my will, last updated in 2016, in which Meredith was named sole executor and primary beneficiary of everything I had. I read my will twice. The second time, I read it out loud. The words sounded different when I said them to the empty room. They sounded like a contract I had signed in my sleep. At 3:30, the doorbell rang, then rang again, then a fist knocked. I didn't move. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to my daughter pound on my front door like a stranger trying to collect a debt. Mom, I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. Mom, open the door. I didn't open the door. I sat very still and waited. After a while, she stopped. I heard her walk back to her car. I heard the car door close. I heard her drive away. I still didn't move. Not for another 20 minutes. Then I got up, and I put the kettle on again, and I pulled a frozen piece of cake out of the freezer, something I had made months ago and forgotten, and I ate it slowly at the kitchen table with my tea. It had gone a little dry. It was still mine. I want to tell you about my wedding day, because I think about it often now, and it feels relevant. Daniel and I were married on a Saturday in June 1965. I was 21. He was 24. We married in the small Methodist church on the corner of Maple and 7th, which is now a yoga studio. My mother made my dress. My father walked me down the aisle. After the ceremony, we had a reception in the church basement. My aunts made the food. My cousin played piano. Daniel and I danced to a song called Come Rain or Come Shine because it was my favorite. And Daniel, who couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, had memorized every word so he could mouth them in my ear while we turned in slow circles on the church floor. I didn't know that night that we would have 51 years together. I didn't know we would lose a daughter. I didn't know our oldest would become someone who treated me like an item on a to-do list. I didn't know I would be sitting alone at 80, eating freezer cake, locking my doors against my own child. But I knew the song. Come rain or come shine. I've been thinking about those words a lot. Tuesday morning, I called a woman named Dorothy Chen. Dorothy had been my neighbor for 12 years before she moved to a condo across town. She was 74, a retired estate attorney, and she still kept her bar license active, just in case. We had stayed in touch the way old women do. Birthday cards, the occasional phone call, a lunch twice a year when we both remembered to plan it. Eleanor, she said, her voice sharp and pleased. I was going to call you about your birthday. I meant to send something. Dorothy, I said, I need a lawyer. The line went quiet for a moment. Then she said, tell me when. Today, if you can. Come at 2. I'll put the kettle on. I drove to Dorothy's condo at 1:45. I hadn't driven in weeks. Meredith had made a habit of picking me up for everything, which she framed as concern, but which I now recognized as surveillance. My car started on the first try. The steering wheel felt good in my hands. Dorothy opened the door before I knocked. She had gotten smaller since I last saw her. We all get smaller. She hugged me, held me back at arm's length, looked at my face and said, something has happened. I told her. All of it. The birthday, the walk home, the phone calls, the locked door, the pile of documents on my kitchen table. She listened without interrupting. She poured 2 cups of tea. She passed me a plate of shortbread cookies. When I finished talking, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Eleanor, she said, what do you want? And that was the first time in 40 years anyone had asked me that question in a way that required an answer. I want the house to be mine, I said. I want my accounts to be mine. I want my will to be mine. I want Meredith off of everything she's on. I want my granddaughter taken care of. And I want it done before Meredith figures out what I'm doing. Dorothy nodded once. All of that is possible. How long? 2 weeks for the essentials, 4 to 6 weeks for the trust structure. If Meredith has any legal authority over you right now, power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, anything, we revoke it today. She has power of attorney, I said. She had me sign it after I broke my wrist. Dorothy didn't roll her eyes, but I could feel her restraint. Did she explain what you were signing? She said it was in case of emergency. It was in case of her convenience. Dorothy pulled a notebook toward her. Let's start there. We worked for 3 hours at her kitchen table. I signed a revocation of power of attorney. I signed a new healthcare directive, naming Dorothy as my proxy until I could designate someone else permanent. I signed a letter instructing my bank to remove Meredith as authorized user on my checking account, which I hadn't even remembered she was on. I made a list of every account Meredith might have her name attached to. The list was longer than I wanted it to be. When I left Dorothy's condo at 5 o'clock, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I had done something. Heavier because I now understood the full shape of what had been taken from me piece by piece while I smiled and let it happen. I drove home the long way. I stopped at a diner on Route 9. I ordered a grilled cheese and a bowl of tomato soup. I ate it at the counter. The waitress called me honey and refilled my coffee without asking. I tipped her more than I should have. I didn't care. Wednesday morning, Meredith came to the house again. This time she didn't knock. She used the key I had given her in 2019 for emergencies. She walked into my kitchen at 9:15 while I was eating toast. Mom. I didn't look up. I finished chewing. I set the toast down. Hello, Meredith. She was wearing a grey suit. She must have been coming from court or going to court. Her hair was pulled back in the severe way she had adopted in her 40s. She looked tired. Good, I thought, and then I was surprised at myself. Why didn't you answer the door yesterday? I was busy. Mum, I drove over here worried sick. I thought something happened to you. Something did happen to me, I said. I turned 80. She sat down across from me without being invited. She folded her hands on the table. The gesture was one she used with difficult clients, I could tell. I had watched her practice it once in the mirror when she was 26. I don't know what I did to upset you, she said, but I want to understand. I want to talk about it. You told me to make it quick. She blinked. What? At my birthday, in front of your husband, in front of Juniper, in front of the Hendersons. You told me to make it quick because you had dinner reservations. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mom, that's what this is about? A joke? It wasn't a joke. It was a figure of speech. No. Mom. Meredith. I looked at her directly for the first time since she had walked in. I want you to listen to me. I don't want you to explain. I don't want you to defend yourself. I just want you to listen. I am 80 years old. I have lived in this house for 52 years. I buried your father in a plot I paid for. I buried your sister in a plot I paid for. I have given you money when you asked. I have watched your children when you asked. I have been polite to Gregory for 30 years because you asked. And on Sunday, at the only birthday I have left that ends in a round number, I made myself a cake, and I put on a dress, and I came to your house, and you told me to make it quick. She started to speak. I held up my hand. I'm not finished. I am done being quick. I am done being convenient. I am done making myself small so your life runs smoothly. You will not come into this house without my permission again. You will give me back the key I gave you. And anything you think you have a claim to anything we are going to talk about with attorneys present. Do you understand me? Her face had gone still. It was the face she used in court when opposing counsel said something she didn't expect. Mom, is someone influencing you? Have you been talking to someone? I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out sharp and surprised, like a door slamming in wind. Meredith, I said, do you hear yourself? Your mother tells you to treat her with respect, and your first thought is that someone else must have put the idea in her head. I didn't say that. You did say that, and the fact that you said it is part of why we are here. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, picked up her purse. Her hands were trembling. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Give me the key, I said. She took it off her ring. She set it on the table between us. Then she walked out of my kitchen. And for the first time in her 56 years of life, my daughter did not slam the door behind her. I sat at the table for a long time after she left. The toast had gone cold. I threw it away and made a fresh piece. That afternoon, I called Juniper. She answered on the second ring. Grandma? Hi, sweetheart. Are you okay? Mom said. She stopped herself. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm very fine. Will you come see me this week? Just you. Not your aunt. Not anyone else. Just you. There was a silence on the line. Then, quietly, yeah, I can come Friday after work. Friday is good. Grandma? Yes, honey. I'm sorry about Sunday. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I just sat there. You don't have to apologize to me. But thank you. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and looked out the window at the ruined garden. And I thought, there is still time. There is still some time. Friday evening at 6:15, Juniper knocked at my front door. I opened it, and there she was, 26 years old, with Caroline's eyes and Caroline's hair, and a tentative smile that made my chest ache. She was holding a grocery bag and a bottle of wine. I brought pasta ingredients, she said. I thought maybe we could cook together, if that's okay. That's more than okay, honey. Come in. She stepped inside, and I watched her look around the house like she hadn't seen it in a long time, which she hadn't. Meredith had always hosted the holidays. Meredith had always scheduled the visits. I hadn't had Juniper alone in my kitchen since she was in high school. She set the groceries on the counter. She pulled out tomatoes, garlic, onions, fresh basil, a good parmesan wrapped in paper, a pound of pasta. She had thought about it. She had shopped on purpose. How did you know tomato sauce was my favorite? She smiled. Mom used to say you only made real sauce on special occasions. I remembered. We cooked together. I let her chop the garlic. I told her how Daniel used to say you could always tell a person's character by how thin they sliced their garlic. She laughed the way Caroline used to laugh, all the way from her stomach. And for a moment, the kitchen felt full in a way it hadn't in a decade. Over dinner, she asked me what had happened on Sunday. I told her. All of it. I didn't soften anything. I didn't pretend. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, pushing a piece of pasta around her plate with her fork. Grandma, she said finally, can I tell you something? And you have to promise not to say anything to Mom. I promise. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. I've wanted to move out for 2 years. She won't let me. She says I'm not responsible enough. She keeps finding reasons. First, it was the pandemic. Then it was that I needed to save more money. Then it was that the rental market was bad. She opened a savings account for me when I was in college and put herself on it as a co-signer. She won't take her name off. Any time I want to make a big purchase, I have to ask her. She calls it looking out for me. I set my fork down. Juniper, how much is in that account? About 40,000. Most of it is money Dad sent after Mom died. Some of it is from Grandma and Grandpa, I mean Dad's parents. And some of it is what I've earned. And it's in her name too. Yes, I nodded slowly. Would you like me to help you with that? She looked at me like I had offered her a door she didn't know was there. You can help me with that? I have a lawyer now, honey. Her name is Dorothy. She's very good. And she would love to meet you. Juniper started to cry. Not hard, just a few tears that she wiped away quickly. I didn't know I was allowed to ask. Sweetheart, You have always been allowed to ask. We ate the rest of our pasta. We opened the wine, and I had half a glass, which was more wine than I'd had in 3 years. She washed the dishes. I dried. She stayed until almost 11. Before she left, she hugged me at the door for a long time. She smelled like Caroline's shampoo, or maybe I was imagining that. The brain does what it wants at my age. After she drove away, I sat in the living room in the dark with a single lamp on, and I made a new list in my notebook. At the top of the list, I wrote, Juniper first. Dorothy agreed to see Juniper on Monday. I drove her there. I sat in the waiting area while they talked for an hour and a half. When Juniper came out, her face was flushed in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl opening Christmas presents. Grandma, she said, she's going to help me. I know. She said if we do it right, Mom won't even be able to stop her. She said it's my money. It was always my money. It was always your money, honey. On the drive home, Juniper asked me if I was scared. Of what? I said. Of what Mom is going to do, when she finds out. I thought about that for a minute. I drove past the diner where I'd eaten the grilled cheese. I drove past the turn that would take me to Meredith's neighborhood. I drove past the spot where the bus had let me off 6 days ago, in a blue dress and a cardigan that wasn't warm enough. No, I said. I'm not scared. I was scared before. I'm not scared now. How did that happen? I glanced at her, at Caroline's eyes in her daughter's face. I remembered I'm a person. Meredith figured it out sooner than I hoped. It was a Thursday, 10 days after my birthday. I was in the kitchen making tea when my cell phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but I saw it was Dorothy's number, so I picked up. Eleanor, she said, Meredith just called my office. She's furious. She wants to know who I am and what business I have with her mother. What did you say? I said I don't discuss my clients. She demanded to know if I was representing you. I said I don't discuss my clients. She threatened to file something. I said she was welcome to try. Then she hung up on me. I'm sorry, Dorothy. Don't apologize. I enjoyed it. I haven't had a good fight in 8 years. But Eleanor, she's going to come over. Probably tonight. Probably soon. You should decide now how you want to handle it. I thanked her. I hung up. I went to the living room and sat in Daniel's old chair and thought. At 6:02, Meredith's car pulled into the driveway. I had been expecting it. I had my tea. I had my notebook. I had Dorothy's number on speed dial. I unlocked the front door and sat in the living room and waited. She didn't knock this time either. She walked in. Her face was white. Her eyes were red. She had been crying, which surprised me. I hadn't seen Meredith cry since her father's funeral, and even then it had been brief and controlled. Mom. Meredith, sit down. She sat on the couch across from me. She didn't take off her coat. Who is Dorothy Chen? A friend, and my attorney. Your attorney? Yes. Since when do you have an attorney? Since last Tuesday. She put her face in her hands. When she looked up, her makeup was smudged under her eyes. Mum, what are you doing? I'm putting my affairs in order. I'm protecting my house and my savings. I'm making sure Juniper has access to the money her father left her. I'm making sure that when I die, my wishes are honored and not managed. You're acting like I've been stealing from you. Meredith. I set down my tea. I don't think you've been stealing from me. I think you've been assuming. And assumption, when it goes on long enough, becomes the same thing. You put your name on my checking account without asking. You took power of attorney over me after I broke a wrist. You ripped out my garden. You chose the landscaper. You chose the caregiver you tried to hire. You chose when I ate. You chose when I slept. You chose when I came and when I went. And when I turned 80, you told me to make it quick. I didn't, Mom. That was one sentence. It was not one sentence. It was a summary of 30 years. And I understood it finally. And I am not going back. She started to cry. Not performatively. Really. Her shoulders shook. She put her hands over her face and sobbed in a way she hadn't allowed herself to sob in a long time, maybe not since Caroline died. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done, sitting there and watching my child cry and not reaching for her. But I understood that if I reached for her now, I would undo everything. I would become the mother who smoothed over and apologized and made the bad feeling go away. And the bad feeling wasn't going anywhere. It had been waiting 30 years to be felt. After a long time, she wiped her face with the back of her hand. Is this because Juniper talked to you? Juniper had nothing to do with this. She told Dorothy something, didn't she? About me? Meredith, listen to what you just said. What? You think your daughter, my granddaughter, your dead sister's daughter, might have said something to my lawyer, and your first reaction is betrayal, not curiosity, not concern, betrayal. Do you hear what that sounds like? She didn't answer. Juniper is a grown woman. She is 26 years old. She has the right to speak to anyone she chooses, about anything she chooses. You have been holding on to her because you think she still belongs to you. She doesn't. She never did. She belonged to Caroline, and now she belongs to herself. I raised her. Yes, and I'm grateful, and she's grateful. Neither of us is disputing that. But gratitude isn't ownership. She was quiet for a long time. The light was changing in the room. The sun was dropping behind the house next door. Finally, she said, "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to go home. I want you to think about what I've said. I want you to stop calling Dorothy. I want you to wait until I'm ready to talk, and I will be ready eventually, but not tonight. And the next time you want to see me, I want you to call and ask, the way any other person would." She stood up slowly. She looked older than she had when she walked in. I tried to feel something about that, but I couldn't find the feeling. I think it had used itself up. At the door, she turned. "Mom, I love you." "I know you do, Meredith. I love you too. But love isn't enough by itself. It has to come with respect. Go home." She left. I locked the door behind her. I went back to the living room. I picked up my tea, which had gone cold. I drank it anyway. The next 3 weeks were the busiest I had been in a decade. Dorothy walked me through every piece of paperwork. We set up a revocable living trust. We updated my will. We transferred the deed to the house into the trust. We changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance. We moved my savings into a new account in my name only. We set up a separate fund for Juniper that Meredith could not touch. We wrote a new healthcare directive naming Juniper as my proxy, with Dorothy as backup. We documented everything. We double-checked everything. Dorothy said, at one point, "Eleanor, you are making me enjoy my work again." I slept better in those 3 weeks than I had in years. The house felt different. Not bigger, not emptier. Different, like it had exhaled. Juniper came over twice a week. Sometimes we cooked, sometimes we just sat. She told me things about her life she had never told anyone. She told me she had been seeing a therapist for 2 years, in secret, paying cash so it wouldn't show up on insurance. Because she didn't want Meredith to know she thought she needed one. She told me she had been in love with a man named Soren for 4 years, a software engineer she had met at work, and she had never brought him to a single family event because she knew Meredith would find something wrong with him. She told me Soren had asked her to move in with him 18 months ago, and she had said no, because she was afraid. "I'm not afraid anymore, Grandma," she said one evening, cross-legged on my living room rug. "I'm moving in with him next month. I told him this morning." "I'd like to meet him," I said. She looked up. "Really?" "Really." She brought Soren over the following Sunday. He was tall and soft-spoken. He had good hands and direct eyes. He looked at Juniper the way Daniel used to look at me, which is how I knew he would do. We ate roast chicken. He helped me with the dishes without being asked. Before they left, he shook my hand and said, "I can see where she gets it from." "Gets what?" I asked. "Her steadiness," he said. I didn't cry until they drove away. Then I cried for about 10 minutes, and I thought about Caroline, and I thought about Daniel, and I thought about how Caroline would have loved him, and how Daniel would have clapped him on the back and told him to get her home before dark. Meredith called me on a Tuesday in mid-May. I answered, "Mom, Meredith. I'd like to come see you, if you'll let me. I have some things I want to say." "When?" "Whenever works for you." It was the first time she had asked like that in years, maybe ever. I told her to come Thursday at 4. She arrived on time. She didn't walk in, she knocked. I opened the door. She was holding a small bouquet of flowers from the grocery store, the cheap kind wrapped in plastic, roses and baby's breath. She handed them to me awkwardly, like a teenage boy on a first date. "I didn't know what kind you liked anymore." "White roses," I said. "I've always liked white roses. Come in." She sat in the living room. I put the flowers in water. I brought 2 cups of tea. She took a long breath before she spoke. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist, for about 10 days. Gregory said I needed to, or he was going to start sleeping in the guest room." That made me set my tea down. "I've been going through things with her, about Caroline, about Dad, about you." Her voice caught. She steadied it. "I don't think I've been a very good daughter. Meredith. Let me finish, Mom. Please. I need to say this." I nodded. "I think after Caroline died, I decided I was the one who had to hold everything together. I had to be the responsible one. I had to be the organized one. I had to be the one who had all the answers. And somewhere in there, I stopped treating you like a person and started treating you like a problem to manage. And I didn't notice, because no one told me to notice. You never told me. You just kept going along with it. And I took that as permission." She was crying quietly. She wasn't trying to hide it. "I'm sorry about the garden. I'm so sorry about the garden, Mom. I didn't understand what those plants were. I thought I was helping. But I see now that I wasn't helping. I was just making things more convenient for me. I'm sorry about the power of attorney. I'm sorry about the checking account. I'm sorry about Sunday, and I'm sorry about Juniper. I'm sorry that I treated her like a second chance, instead of letting her just be her own person. She told me yesterday she's moving in with Soren. I've never even met him. I've been offered chances to meet him for 4 years, and I said no every time because I was trying to protect her. I wasn't protecting her. I was keeping her." She stopped. She wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me try. To do it differently. I don't know how yet. I probably won't do it well at first. But I want to try." I looked at her. My oldest daughter, 56 years old, sitting in my living room with grocery store flowers and smudged mascara, and the kind of face I hadn't seen on her since she was a small girl who had just broken something and was waiting to see if she was in trouble. "Meredith," I said, "come here." She got up. She came around the coffee table. She sat next to me on the couch. I put my arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into me like a child, and she cried into my collarbone, and I held her, and for a long time we didn't say anything. Finally, I said, "You are going to have to earn this slowly. Do you understand?" "Yes." "And you are going to have to accept that I have made changes you cannot undo. About the will, about the house, about Juniper." "I know." "And you are going to have to let Juniper go. Entirely. No more tracking her. No more holding her accounts. No more deciding for her. She is a woman. You will treat her like one." "I know, Mom, I know. And I am still going to lock my door." She laughed. A wet, surprised laugh, muffled into my shoulder. "Okay. But I will open it when you knock." She stayed for another hour. We didn't talk about anything heavy. She told me about her work. I told her about a book I was reading. Before she left, she helped me carry the roses to the kitchen windowsill. She saw the tomato sauce on the stove. She asked who I'd been cooking for. Juniper and Soren were over on Sunday. How is he? He's lovely. He reminded me of your father. She nodded. Her eyes filled again. She nodded again. I'd like to meet him, Mom, when you think it's the right time. I'll tell Juniper you said so. She'll decide. Okay. Okay. At the door, she hugged me. It was a real hug. She said, "Happy late birthday, Mom." "Thank you, Meredith. Drive safe." I watched her get into her car. I watched her sit in the driveway for a minute with her forehead on the steering wheel. Then I watched her drive away. I stood at the door for a while. The evening light was gold and slanted. My neighbor across the street was walking his dog. A child was laughing somewhere down the block. I closed the door, but I didn't lock it. In June, I planted a garden. It wasn't a big garden, just 2 raised beds in the corner of the backyard where the afternoon sun hits longest. Juniper and Soren built the beds one Saturday. He was good with tools. He was patient with me. He asked my opinion about every plank before he nailed it down. Juniper made lemonade. The 3 of us worked until the sun went low, and then we sat on the back steps and ate sandwiches and watched the sky turn pink. I planted rosemary. I planted tomatoes. I planted white roses along the fence line because Meredith had asked what I wanted for a late birthday present, and I had told her the truth. She came over and helped me dig the holes for the roses. She wore old jeans and a sweatshirt from law school I hadn't seen in 30 years. Her hands got dirty. She didn't complain. At one point, she sat back on her heels and looked at me and said, "I don't remember the last time I did something with my hands, Mom." "Tell Gregory you need a hobby," I said. "Yes, ma'am. I will tell you what my 80th birthday taught me. It taught me that you can spend 40 years training the people you love to treat you a certain way, and then one day you can stop. You can simply stop, and the world does not end. Some people will be angry, some people will be confused. Some people will rise to meet you, and some people will not. And the sorting of those 2 groups will tell you something you have needed to know for a long time. It taught me that love and respect are 2 different things, and you need both. One without the other is a kind of slow starving, and you won't notice you're starving until someone hands you a real meal. It taught me that it is never too late. I am 80. I planted a garden this summer. I have a lawyer now, and she is wonderful. I have a granddaughter who calls me twice a week, and a young man who calls me ma'am in a way that doesn't feel like distance, it feels like honor. I have a daughter who is learning, slowly and clumsily, how to be my daughter again. I have a house that is mine. I have a door I can lock when I want to and open when I want to. I have white roses coming up by the fence. And if you are sitting somewhere right now, listening to this, and you are tired, and you are not sure if anyone sees you anymore, and you have been told in 100 small ways that your time is almost up and you should please hurry, I want you to hear me. I want you to hear me clearly. You do not have to make it quick. You do not have to make it quick for anyone. Not your children, not your grandchildren, not your spouse, not your neighbors. Not the person at the bank who speaks a little too loudly at you. Not anyone. Your life is not a favor you are doing for someone else. It is yours. Every breath of it is yours. Every hour of it is yours. You get to sit. You get to cook what you want. You get to say no. You get to lock the door. You get to plant a garden. You get to mean it. If this story reached you, share it. Pass it to someone who has been told, in any number of ways, to make it quick. Remind them that their time is not borrowed. Remind them that 80 is not an ending. Remind them that a cake they bake themselves, eaten alone at their own table, is still a birthday. Remind them that they are allowed to start over at any age, in any room, on any Sunday evening, in a blue dress, with or without a coat. I walked home that night, and I am still walking.